The forest welcomed them with open arms, its towering pines casting long shadows that stretched like grasping fingers. Jake, Emily, and Chris unloaded their gear, the excitement of their camping trip bubbling over. Laughter echoed through the woods as they set up their tent, the canvas a beacon of civilization against the encroaching darkness. A fire crackled to life, casting dancing shadows that painted the surrounding trees with an eerie glow. As darkness deepened, swallowing the last rays of sunlight, a chill settled over the campsite. The friends huddled closer to the warmth of the fire, sharing stories in hushed tones. Legends of the Jersey Devil, a creature of myth and folklore whispered through the pines, carried on the wind. Its grotesque form, a horrifying blend of beast and demon, sent shivers down Emily and Chris's spines. A creature with the head of a goat, leathery wings and hooves, whispered Chris, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. They say it roams these very woods, preying on unsuspecting campers. Jake scoffed, his skepticism a shield against the growing unease. Just old wives' tales, he declared, poking at the fire with a stick. Stories meant to scare kids, but even his voice lacked its usual conviction. The forest seemed to hold its breath, listening to their every word. Emily leaned closer to the fire, her gaze flickering nervously towards the darkness that pressed against the edges of their campsite. "But there have been sightings," she insisted, her voice barely a whisper. "People hearing strange noises, seeing things in the woods." Chris nodded eagerly, adding fuel to the fire of her fear. "They say it lets out a blood-curdling scream," he said, his voice dropping to a dramatic hush. "A scream that chills you to the bone." Jake rolled his eyes, his skepticism unwavering. "You two are letting your imaginations run wild," he said, though a shiver ran down his spine despite his attempts to appear unconcerned. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes peering at them from the depths of the forest. "Don't be so quick to dismiss the legends," Emily said, her voice low and serious. "There are things in this world that we can't explain, things that go bump in the night." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fear. Jake, determined to break the spell of their shared unease, suggested a night hike. "Come on," he said, forcing a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Let's explore a bit. What's the worst that could happen?" His words echoed into the darkness, a challenge to the unseen forces that seemed to surround them. The forest welcomed them into its embrace, its cool, damp breath caressing their skin. With each step deeper into the woods, the darkness seemed to thicken, pressing against them like a suffocating blanket. The moonlight filtered through the dense canopy of leaves, painted the forest floor in an eerie, otherworldly glow. "You sure this was a good idea, Jake?" Emily asked, her voice tight with apprehension. Her hand brushed against his, and he could feel the tremor that ran through her. Chris, usually the bravest of the three, walked a step behind, his gaze darting nervously from shadow to shadow. "Relax, guys," Jake said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "It's just a walk in the woods." But his words lacked conviction, his own unease growing with each step they took away from the safety of their campfire. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, the familiar sounds of the night transformed into something sinister. The rustling of leaves became the slithering of unseen creatures. The snapping of twigs underfoot echoed like breaking bones. The air grew heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the frantic beating of their hearts. The forest seemed to hold its breath, watching, waiting. The oppressive silence was broken only by the crunch of dry leaves beneath their feet and the frantic thrumming of their own pulses. Each gust of wind that rustled the leaves above sent shivers down their spines, whispering of unseen eyes and creatures lurking just beyond the reach of their flashlight beams. "Did you hear that?" Chris whispered, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his own heart. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes wide with fear. Emily and Jake froze, straining to hear what had spooked their friend. A twig snapped in the distance, followed by the rustle of leaves. It was a sound that sent a chill down their spines, a sound that spoke of something large and moving through the undergrowth. "It's probably just a deer," Jake said, trying to sound calm and reassuring, but his voice wavered, betraying his own growing unease. He shone his flashlight in the direction of the sound, but the beam was swallowed by the impenetrable darkness. Another snap, closer this time, then a guttural growl, low and menacing, that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. Fear, primal and instinctive, clawed its way up Jake's throat, choking his words before he could utter them. Section 5. A blood-curdling symphony, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence, echoing through the trees. It was a sound of pure terror, raw and primal, that sent a jolt of adrenaline surging through their veins. Emily gasped, clutching at Jake's arm, her eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Before Jake could answer, another scream pierced the night, closer this time, followed by the frantic flapping of wings. The sound was like nothing they had ever heard before, a grotesque symphony of screeches and growls that sent shivers down their spines. Panic surged through them, an instinctive flight response to the unknown. "Run!" Jake shouted, his voice hoarse with fear. He grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her along with him as he turned and fled blindly through the darkened woods. They crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at their faces, thorns tearing at their clothes. The sounds of their pursuer echoed behind them, urging them onward, fueling their terror. Section 6. Terror in the moonlight. Moonlight, fractured by the canopy above, painted the forest floor in a chaotic dance of light and shadow. Each fallen branch, each gnarled root became a treacherous obstacle in their desperate flight. The air, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, now carried with it a new terrifying odor, a musky, sulphurous stench that burned their nostrils and sent waves of nausea rolling through them. Behind them, the creature roared its rage, the sound a monstrous symphony of screeches and growls. Jake risked a glance over his shoulder, catching a fleeting glimpse of their pursuer in a patch of moonlight. It was a grotesque, hulking figure, its silhouette a nightmarish blend of beast and demon. "It's getting closer!" Chris screamed, his voice cracking with panic. He stumbled, falling to his knees, his breath ragged and desperate. Jake and Emily skidded to a halt, their flight instinct battling with their loyalty to their friend. They couldn't leave him behind, not to whatever lurked in the darkness behind them. "Get up, Chris!" Jake shouted, hauling him to his feet. "We have to keep moving!" Section 7. Claws of fear. Adrenaline surged through their veins, propelling them forward, but the creature was gaining on them. Its heavy footsteps pounded the earth behind them, shaking the very trees around them. The air grew thick with the stench of its passing, a foul miasma that clawed at their throats and stung their eyes. They burst into a small clearing, the moon hanging low in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and twisted around them. In the center of the clearing stood a dilapidated cabin, its windows dark and lifeless, its door hanging precariously from one hinge. "In there!" Jake shouted, pointing towards the dilapidated structure. It was a desperate hope, a sanctuary of unknown safety, but it was their only chance. They scrambled towards the cabin, their lungs burning, their legs screaming for respite. Chris, his face pale and streaked with sweat, stumbled once more, falling heavily against the cabin door. It swung open with a groan, revealing a dark and dusty interior. The creature's roar echoed behind them, closer than ever, shaking the very foundations of the cabin. They tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind them and scrambling to secure it with whatever they could find. Section 8. A desperate flight. The flimsy door rattled under the creature's assault, its claws scraping against the wood like sandpaper. Panic clawed at their throats, choking off their breath as they frantically searched for anything to reinforce their fragile barricade. Chris, his face ashen, slammed a broken chair leg into the rusted latch, while Emily and Jake piled whatever debris they could find against the door. A guttural growl, vibrating with frustration, sent shivers down their spines. The creature was toying with them, savoring their terror before it broke through their feeble defenses. Jake's gaze darted around the small cabin, desperately searching for another way out, an escape route, anything. He spotted a small window, its glass long gone, boarded up with rotting planks of wood. "Help me with this!" he shouted, pointing towards his discovery. Working with desperate speed, fueled by adrenaline and fear, they pried the boards loose, their fingers bleeding, their muscles screaming in protest. The creature slammed against the door once more, the sound like thunder in the confines of the small cabin. It was only a matter of time before their defenses crumbled. Section 9. Freedom's Dawn. With a final, desperate heave, the last board gave way, revealing a narrow opening. Jake scrambled through first, followed closely by Emily and Chris. They tumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath, their lungs burning. The creature's roar echoed from inside the cabin, a sound of fury and frustration. They didn't waste a second, didn't dare to look back as they fled into the darkness. Branches whipped at their faces, thorns tore at their clothes, but they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Not while that sound, that monstrous symphony of rage, still echoed in their ears. They ran until their legs screamed in protest, until their lungs burned with exhaustion, until the forest around them began to lighten with the first pale fingers of dawn. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, they finally allowed themselves to collapse, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and lingering fear. They had escaped, but the memory of that night, the encounter with the creature, the whispers in the pines, would forever be seared into their minds. Section 10. Scars of the Unknown. The rising sun painted the forest in a new light, chasing away the shadows and the terrors of the night. But the events of that night, the whispers in the pines, lingered like a bad dream, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their world. Jake, his usual skepticism shaken to its core, stared at his reflection in a nearby stream. Gone was the cocky confidence, replaced by a haunted look in his eyes, a weariness that spoke of a night spent wrestling with fear and the unknown. Emily sat beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the trees. The terror she had experienced was etched on her face, a stark reminder of their close call. Even Chris, usually the bravest of the three, seemed subdued, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet contemplation. They had faced their fears, stared into the abyss, and emerged forever changed. The whispers in the pines, once dismissed as mere legend, now held a chilling truth. The Jersey Devil, a creature of myth and folklore, had become a tangible terror, a scar on their collective psyche. Section 11. Whispers linger. The journey back to their campsite was a blur, their steps heavy, their silence speaking volumes. The familiar clearing, once a haven of laughter and shared stories, now felt tainted, marked by the unseen presence that lingered in the shadows. They packed their gear with a quiet efficiency, their movements mechanical, their minds still reeling from their encounter. The forest, bathed in the golden light of morning, seemed deceptively peaceful, but they knew better. Beneath the surface, the darkness still pulsed, the whispers in the pines still carried their chilling message. As they drove away from the forest, the tires crunching over the gravel road, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every bird's call seemed to whisper their names, a chilling reminder of the night they had danced with the Jersey Devil. They had escaped with their lives, but the whispers in the pines, the memory of that night would forever linger, a chilling testament to the power of fear and the enduring nature of myth. The Jersey Devil, once a legend, would forever be a part of their story, a chilling reminder that some things are best left undisturbed, some whispers best left unheard.